Hi everyone. Today I wanted to talk about the male gaze, the female gaze, and why the heck are women attracted to dad bods, and why are men so mad about it? These are tricky questions because of how skewed the perception is of like what women actually want, you know? Men who were perceived as more softer and like more in tune with their feminine side, those were the men that I was most attracted to. We don't want to be overpowered by men anymore.
Wow, that's super inaccurate, because if it were true that most women or even a majority of women wanted that, then you wouldn't constantly hear stuff like this.
Even though I may be like 5 feet tall, nothing less than 5'10".
And I mean constantly.
Would you date a shorter guy?
No.
Why?
So when I look for a guy, I look for someone who has a very safe aura, but with shorter guys, I don't feel as safe.
And in the past.
What do you look for in a man physically?
Well, I like a man to be bigger than me and to have a strong character, somebody who has a stronger character than I have.
And to the extent where don't dating apps give women the ability to filter men out by height? If it wasn't a strong preference in most women for their men to be bigger and more powerful than them so they can serve as a protector, then they wouldn't constantly ask for it. Anyway, the woman from the first clip is 23-year-old YouTuber Nicole Rafiee. You may remember her from a video that I made 2 years ago where I clipped her saying this.
Hi, I hate men.
That video of hers has since been deleted, and it's been a while since she said it, so I usually don't hold people accountable for bad takes that are old. But considering that she said it again in the video that I'm responding to...
On my channel, I'm pretty open about being fearful of men, hating the occasional man, you know what I mean?
So since she said that recently, I'm going to hold her to it. Particularly because she frames it in a way that makes it seem like men in general are abusive, as opposed to a minority number of sociopaths who do the abusing. Only about 5% of people in America go to prison, and even including those who don't get caught, the amount of men who are abusive is probably not vastly over that number. But the video today is about dad bods. Well, sort of. Let's hear her argument.
Okay, so recently I've seen the rise again in the love for dad bods online. Next trend I want to see is some appreciation for the mom bod. And what I see is a lot of women talking about liking dad bods, appreciating dad bods. And you would think that more men would be happy about this or, you know, appreciative of this and like feeling like, okay, women are embracing more body types. But instead, it just kind of fuels a lot more anger in men, actually. At least from what I've noticed.
That doesn't really make sense. With all the people saying that women have standards that are too high, you would think that a pretty sizable number of men would be happy that they can get away with eating a few extra hamburgers per week. Let's see her evidence that men are getting mad.
These friggin' women are talking about wanting some big old fat bearded country boy that can't see his back.
Okay, it seems like this guy's a little offended, but from a critical standpoint, it looks like he could be a fitness/alpha male type influencer, and women not being attracted to his body type might affect his market, so it makes sense that he doesn't want that to be the case. Since there is a financial or social incentive to him having that opinion, I think it's hard to make the point that this is something that people believe in general. Let's see her second example.
That's fine, but I shouldn't get shit on when I say I'm not attracted to fat girls and I will not date a fat girl.
This guy literally said it was fine, so it doesn't seem like good evidence of your point either. The thing he's mad about is fat acceptance advocates saying that you're a bigot if you don't want to date them, not women who are attracted to dad bods. Last example. This, yet again, doesn't seem like anger. It seems like he's making a joke for TikTok, and if anything, the emotion he is displaying is depression. She uses a fourth example, but it still doesn't feel like anger, and I also notice that these are all gym bros who don't actually make up a massive portion of the population because most people are overweight. So I think it's hard to generalize your take that men are mad about dad bods with this evidence. And this kind of thing is really a problem on both sides of the equation. Everyone is using low-quality evidence for their points. For example, I recently saw this from the opposite end of the equation from the Whatever podcast.
What percentage of men do you find attractive?
Maybe like 1%. Maybe
1% of men you find attractive.
Maybe like 0.5.
Not very many, like maybe 5 to 10%.
15%.
15%?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very low. I really don't know. Probably under 10.
Under 10%,
yeah.
Okay.
10%, top 10%.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the point of this clip was to make people say, see, women bad, they aren't attracted to most men. But think about it for a second. 70% of people are overweight, and contrary to what Nicole says in her video, I think that most people don't want a partner who is overweight. Second, do you walk out on the street and think everyone is attractive? I think if you actually questioned people in general and had a real conversation with them, they would probably say that they personally only find about 1 to 5% of people attractive. That doesn't mean that everyone else is unattractive. It just means that you aren't their type. Honestly, even though these shows like to constantly put 10 of the same type of girl on in every episode, I think that some of the girls were actually pretty generous. The refreshing thing here is that a lot of people in the comments pointed out that this was bad evidence, and someone posted this clip here.
What percentage of people would you say are good looking?
25%.
25%? No way, it's like 4 to 6%. It's a 20 to 1 shot.
You're way off.
Way off?
Yeah.
Have you been to the Motor Vehicle Bureau? It's a leper colony down there.
So basically what you're saying is 95% of the population is undateable?
Undateable!
Then how are all these people getting together?
Alcohol.
So I see bad takes a lot from the other side too, but this video is about Nicole, so let's get back to her argument.
This begs the question, what do women want? And what do men think that women want? When I found out what the male gaze is, I started noticing it all around me. Like, I could not get my mind off of it. I became so hyper aware of what the male gaze was and how I was actually performing for the male gaze without even realizing it. Even when women are alone, they still feel like they are performing for men. And I think that we can blame this on men being the sole writers of women pretty much since media began.
Yes, tell me how it's all men's fault. You have an anxiety issue about men always looking at you even when they're not there, and it must be the responsibility of the male gender as a whole for causing that.
Women were written in a very certain way, always looking beautiful and dainty, and it's just put these unrealistic expectations for us as women while we're watching women on our screens.
Now, 5 minutes later, she does mention the standards being high for men too, but she still finds a way to make men bear all the responsibility for that.
But they're also the creators of the male beauty standards themselves. But they love blaming women for it.
Why does it always have to be one sex blaming the other? Because when you step out of that dynamic for a second, you might think to ask, is it the directors setting the standards? Or is it the directors perceiving what most women are attracted to and reflecting that in their movies? But allow me to clarify this because not necessarily, Nicole, but the feminist types love to say unrealistic body standards for women when 95% of the time they're saying that a woman who is thin is unrealistic. So let's talk about what the guys have to do to have the body of a Marvel actor. First, they have to be thin. So by feminist standards, that's already crazy unrealistic. Then they have to spend between 2 and 5 years at the gym working their asses off lifting weights, followed by multiple cycles of getting fat and losing weight so they can have muscle without a body fat percentage of 30. And that's not including the body types that you can't even achieve without steroids. Followed by the guys who are obviously on drugs saying, "Trust me, bro, I'm a natural bodybuilder." But it's curious how during this video, she never once gives responsibility to women who create actual unrealistic or impossible standards by going on Instagram and using like 20 different filters and editing the crap out of their photos.
She photoshops herself so much that her skin just looks permanently blurry. Look at this photo where she's holding the cup. The cup is blending into her face.
It's weird that this wasn't mentioned or women weren't to blame here for unrealistic standards. But all right, let's hear about the kind of men that women are actually attracted to.
Real life people examples are Harry Styles, Conan Gray, Timothée Chalamet. Because these men can be in touch with their feminine side, not be afraid to show it. Women are attracted to their talent, how they behave to their fans, how they behave in interviews, and thus creating a large woman-led cult-like following. They are a good example of what many women want, and men hate them for it.
I'm having a tough time imagining that Nicole expects people to read why people were criticizing Harry Styles, or maybe she had the idea to edit this photo in after she already recorded, but that's not what Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens, who was a woman, are responding to, which is all kind of confusing because her original point that I didn't show because it was too long-winded was actually talking about Uncle Jesse from Full House, who was mostly written by men, being desirable because he's good with kids and doesn't treat women like crap. Which seems reasonable, but how do we go from that to Harry Styles wearing a dress? Because that's what they are actually responding to. It's about Hollywood and mainstream media promoting weak men and the feminization of men, and Candace is echoing the fact that most women don't want men who act like women. They aren't hating on women for liking dad bods or men who treat them well. Also, there are like a lot of pictures of Harry Styles doing this. There is no way this guy is straight.
Sexuality is a spectrum. It's not like anyone's 100% straight or 100% gay.
I disagree, but let's continue hearing more about what women are attracted to.
Take, for example, Ezra Miller's character Patrick in Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Are you sure you want to go there?
Also had to come to terms with that Ezra Miller as Frankenfurter was my sexual awakening. I had the fattest crush on Ezra Miller.
Okay, we are definitely going there. And yes, these videos were made after all the criminal stuff that Ezra did became public, and she does mention that Ezra Miller is a bad guy, but seriously, this is bad optics. Though I guess we can hear her out.
But we're just gonna try and ignore who Ezra Miller is and just focus on their character Patrick instead. Patrick was never shirtless, never sexualized, not written for the female gaze whatsoever. Patrick's only interactions with women were kind and endearing.
Hey, nothing. Hey, nothing.
Suck it, virginity pledges.
And the character ended up being gay anyway, yet was still perceived as one of the most attractive characters, at least to me and my female friend group.
He was the most attractive character to you and your female friend group. Is that enough evidence to say that this archetype is attractive to women in general? Or is it just you and your friends? Because people tend to pick friendships based on people who they share interests with, meaning that you and your friends are most likely going to think the same things are attractive. So just because your friends like it doesn't mean that everyone likes it.
For me personally, one of the most attractive men to me is Fletcher Shears, who is very comfortable dressing however he pleases, will sometimes put on a long wig and a dress and makeup. And while some men may be like, what the f do you see in this dude? I am like, I love a man who is very confident in himself and isn't scared to show a more feminine side to him, dressing how he wants, not caring.
Okay, this is the third man in a dress with a questionable sexuality that she's mentioned in a single video, and I'm starting to notice a pattern.
A lot of times, we just want a dude who is comfortable in himself and looks like us.
Yeah, maybe a little too much like you. Also, Fletcher looks like he's on drugs in this photo. That's a red flag. She keeps repeating over and over that her biggest qualifier of attraction is whether or not a guy is nice to women, which of course is important, but nice doesn't always mean good. Which brings us to the female gaze.
Let's talk about the female gaze. It's the same as the male gaze. However, can you guess? It's from the perspective of a woman. Basically, anytime that you've watched a Greta Gerwig movie, it's from the female gaze. Think of a character like Timothy Chalamet, Edward Cullen in Twilight. So why are women attracted to men like this?
Timothy Chalamet's character was attractive in Lady Bird. The whole point of his character Kyle in that movie was to be a pretentious asshole who lies to the main character to get her in bed. Most of my viewers are men, so I'm guessing that most of you have not seen this movie, but I did all the required reading that Nicole recommended to make this video, and Timothy's character is well written in a way to be immediately unlikable to anyone who is perceptive. Then Nicole mentions Edward Cullen from Twilight, who is like a 100-year-old stalker who was in love with a high school kid. Even Robert Pattinson hates Edward.
If Edward was not a fictional character and you just met him in reality, you know, he's one of those guys who'd be like an axe murderer.
Every moment I'm with you, I desperately wanted to kill you. And she's like, I don't care. I love you. And it's like, well, there's definitely something wrong with her. He's like, what am I doing with this kid? I'm 108 years old.
And I mean that Robert Pattinson really hates the character. He hates Edward so much that he dunks on him and the writer of Twilight multiple times during promotional interviews.
When I read it, it seemed like it was a book that wasn't supposed to be published. I was convinced that Stephanie was convinced she was Bella. And especially when she says, oh, it was based on a dream, and it's like, oh, I had this dream about this really sexy guy, and she just writes this book about it. It's like, this woman is mad.
So now I'm suspicious. We started off with hyperfeminine men, two of which who aren't even straight, and now you've moved on to saying that men who are super dismissive like Kyle or controlling like Edward are attractive? And I think what she says immediately after the thing about Edward is even more telling.
My own thinking is that we don't really want to be attracted to men who scare us. We don't want to be overpowered by men anymore. We want men who see us as their equal, who are not going to be assholes to us and have very toxic masculine traits.
Okay, who hurt you? You began the video with, there are men that I hate, and in the past implied that at least a majority of men are abusive. Then we move on to you wanting very feminized versions of men, and now it's men scare you? She also says this in multiple videos.
First of all, right now, I currently do work with a trainer, but it's so cool that the benefits are now like, let's get you to lifting more, let's get your energy levels up, let's get your sleep better, and let's getting you fucking strong as fuck so that if you need to beat someone up, you can do so.
This is an abuse victim who has not yet recovered, though she is trying and has mentioned multiple times that she goes to therapy, so props to her for that. Keep at it. But once I heard this stuff, I started digging to see why she is interested in guys who deviate so far from the norm and says that an objectively bad guy like Edward Cullen is attractive because usually that's not a sign of good mental health. Then I found this.
My dad's a little funny. He's so funny, he's so fucking silly, he like got up and left.
I know that you're making a joke here, but I'm sorry that you went through that, and I'm sorry that you didn't have a positive male influence in your life in the form of a parent. Which brings us to this video here about how she was in what sounds like a very abusive relationship in high school, where the guy spread a bunch of false rumors about her after she broke up with him. Honestly, that's kind of feminine behavior for a guy. I believe she also worked in the restaurant industry for a bunch of years too, which I have always heard that it has quite a number of men in it who behave inappropriately, to say it euphemistically. And now why she got into modern feminist ideology makes sense. She's had a bunch of negative experiences with men, and I believe her friend group who has the same taste in men as her is similar in that regard, because she mentioned that her and most of her friends are on psych meds.
I'm fine. I'm genuinely really fine. Like I said, we're trying every SSRI under the sun. 95% of my friends are on SSRIs.
Again, I'm sorry that you're going through that, but by saying that, you are also kind of admittedly putting yourself in a group that deviates from the norm. So when you say that you and your friends are attracted to Ezra Miller, I don't think that you can apply that to women in general. I'm also kind of concerned because she did an in-depth review of that movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, to which, if you haven't seen it, was about a guy fixing some of his mental health issues by making friends with older kids in high school. Personally, I did like the movie, but in her analysis, she missed almost every mental health red flag, like Emma Watson's character cheating on her boyfriend when she kisses the main character Charlie, Charlie's new friends introducing him to hard drugs to the extent that he gets hospitalized for overdosing, minors in a burlesque show, and this moment here where Ezra Miller's character Patrick kisses Charlie, a straight guy, against his consent. This is a major boundary violation and friendship-ending material for a straight guy. The only mental health thing that Nicole got right was that the relationship between Emma Watson, who is 18, and Charlie, who is 14, was inappropriate. Now, all the actors are really in their 20s, so it's hard to see exactly how inappropriate their relationship is, but you get the point. Also, outside of movies, I find that Nicole says a number of things that sound good, but are out of touch with the way people actually behave.
But a really, really chiseled masculine body is not enough for women to be attracted to you, because you can have the looks and be an asshole and your looks mean absolutely nothing, and everyone has probably heard that a million times.
It absolutely is good enough, and it's a major reason why both men and women hook up with losers and abusive partners. But more than that, she says she's trying to make people better in the I Hate Men video.
I just want to work with other people and talk with people and help others.
You want to help people, but you can't do that if you're out here representing a guy like Joseph Quinn in a negative light and discrediting him for doing something right.
That's not to say that the female gaze can't have its flaws, because it 100% can, and it does. For example, putting men on a pedestal for doing the smallest things ever, and for things they don't even deserve to be put on a pedestal for. The number one example that comes to mind is Joseph Quinn, who plays Eddie Munson. But I remember seeing a TikTok of him having a conversation with like another woman, like just a very normal, simple conversation. And the comments were like, oh my God, he's such a good listener. He's looking at her in the eye when she speaks. He's so attentive. It's like, he's having a conversation, and we are putting this man on a pedestal for being normal.
All you're doing here is getting women to have a negative opinion of men. That's what your audience is going to absorb when they hear you present your arguments like this. Now, I tried my best to find this TikTok, but I couldn't. However, I do want to point out that most people, men and women, are bad at listening and being attentive. It's actually a pretty hard skill, which is why his fans connect with it. And he does deserve to be put on a pedestal and praised for that, even from your perspective, because you do want more men behaving like Joseph Quinn, right? As a guy you might convince, I'm certainly not going to think listening is a good thing if I'm going to get crapped on for it. All that being said, I really don't think she has a healthy view of men or masculinity, and the problem with that is that she says she's been in an abusive relationship in the past. Because of that, what I see is that instead of coming to terms with the reality of what men are, She is just avoiding any masculine traits in a man and deeming them as toxic. I don't think I've heard her say anything positive about masculine traits in this video, and I've watched it multiple times. Instead, she promotes weak men who can't control their diets and says this.
A lot of men that I've spoken to have talked about how they go to the gym so that they can be strong and they can be ripped. Sometimes they'll say it's for themselves and health, but a lot of times to also be perceived as more attractive to other women, when that's not what women ask for in the first place.
Women 100% ask for this. Also, why does she present it as honorable to go to the gym for yourself, but kind of implies that it's bad to do so to attract women? I think the more honorable thing is to do it out of service to others, because being attractive to the person that you're with matters. It shows that you care. Personally, if I was dating someone and she didn't make an effort to look attractive, then that would be the end of the relationship.
I don't dress for a man. I don't look a certain way for a man. I don't act a certain way for a man.
I know that modern feminists see this ideology as a thing to aspire to, but this ideology is a big reason why a lot of them are single in their late 30s. Not doing stuff for your partner is an expression of sociopathy and says that you don't care about them. That's how I would feel if my girlfriend said what she just said. I would feel like she doesn't care. And it would be the same if I said I didn't work on my appearance for her. As for the rest of this, Nicole's whole video is very stream of consciousness, and it's hard to follow her arguments from start to finish. We started off with Dad Bods, and then we moved on to Ezra Miller being attractive. Somewhere around that time, she had a sexist take of too many men in Hollywood causing her anxiety issues about performing for men.
And I think that we can blame this on men being the sole writers of women pretty much since media began. Considering that most directors nowadays are still men, most writers are still men. I want to see this change in the future.
Then she mentions some other stuff and ends the video with this.
How do we fix this?
Well, I wasn't really aware that you brought a problem up. The main premise was that you perceived that men are mad about dad bods, which I don't think you proved, and was barely addressed. But okay, how do we fix this?
There needs to be more women writing in media, directing in media. I want to see it now. I'm angry. If you want to be successful towards a female audience, we need to know what women like. And who probably knows it best? Women. Because male directors are missing the point, i.e. Manic Pixie Dream Girls. I could go on a whole tangent about that. And they're also just incorrect about every woman wanting an alpha male.
First off, where's your evidence that male writers and directors are unsuccessful at capturing a female audience? You said that most writers and directors are men, yet women still consume tons of media. Traditionally, women are the primary audience for network television. All those crime shows and doctor shows are written for them. And guess who writes those shows? Also, there are plenty of chick flicks out there written by women that include alpha males as the main focus of the plot. And there are movies like Sleepless in Seattle that are co-written by a man where Tom Hanks is the main love interest and he's not an alpha. Also, superheroes like Spider-Man aren't alpha. These archetypes do exist in movies written by men. It's not always just Michael Cera getting a girl who is only attracted to him because he's the main character in movies like Superbad or Scott Pilgrim. But I imagine that these characters are less prominent than the alpha males because alpha traits are more popular with most women. As I said, I did all the required reading for this video. Nicole recommends 3 different movies: The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Lady Bird, and Yes God Yes, all of which I watched just for this video. The Perks of Being a Wallflower was written by a man, and the other 2 were written by women. Nicole says that men are missing the mark when it comes to these movies, but also says this in a different video.
10 out of 10 movie. I've said since I've seen it, it is my favorite movie.
Weird that men are missing the mark so much, yet your favorite movie was written by a man. And honestly, it was a good movie. Now, I'm sure that the typical modern feminist will suggest that sexism is the reason why there aren't as many women writing movies, but if you actually watch the female-written movies that Nicole recommended, which were Lady Bird and Yes God Yes, they're boring. Like, really boring. Though I will compliment some of the writing in Lady Bird because the psychology of that movie and the characters are absolutely perfect, especially the relationship between the main character and her mom. I've never seen a better done depiction of a barely functional parent-child relationship. That being said, that movie is super, super boring. And the reason it's boring is because there's no goal. It's just a bunch of things happening, and then the story ends. Yes God Yes has the exact same issue. A bunch of things happen, and the story ends. Nothing really connects the scenes to an overarching problem the character is trying to solve, and there's no narrative or central hook in these movies. Whereas in The Perks of Being a Wallflower, the hook is established right away. Charlie meets a girl named Sam, he falls in love, and the rest of the movie is about him trying to make her his girlfriend while other stuff is happening. When you have a central direction the story is going in, like a potential relationship, then you can add all the interesting characters into the story and show how their influence has an effect on the main character. But if you don't have a main purpose in your story, people will perceive it as boring. This is a fundamental writing skill. Last, Nicole mentions the HBO series Euphoria.
Think, for example, the one episode in between season 1 and season 2 of Euphoria where Hunter Schafer got to write her own episode for Jules. It was like perceived as one of the best episodes, got such a positive reaction from fans, and she was like never able to do it again. Her writing never made it into season 2, and then people were angry that it flopped because just missed the mark. You wanted to appeal to women, yet you wouldn't let women write?
I have to say that this is the reference that makes me the most mad, because Euphoria was terrible, and I had to suffer through 10 hours of really boring content to get to the episode that she was referencing. That show has zero plot, and it's just a bunch of unlikable degenerates aimlessly doing stuff, and then kind of a plot forms at episode 7 with a character named Nate as the main villain, but they sort of give up on it by the end of the season. I can honestly say that at no point I was looking forward to the next episode like you might with a similar show like Ozark or Breaking Bad. Now to the female-written episode that was co-written by Hunter Schafer, who is a trans woman, by the way. I'm not sure if that matters, but I have to say that out of all the episodes, this was definitely the most boring because it was a filler episode between season 1 and season 2, which was probably the only reason that Hunter was allowed to write for it. All that happened is that we watched Hunter's character Jules go through a 1-hour therapy session, which was so unrememberable that I can't even tell you what happened, and I just watched it a few days ago. Though interestingly enough, and I will give credit where credit is due here, they had another filler episode with Zendaya's character, who is an addict in this show, that did the same exact cafe scene gimmick, but instead she's talking to her 12-step program sponsor, where he said this.
You think you out here fighting a revolution and Bank of America's on your side? Give me a fucking break.
Based, this is the old left, and this is when the left used to be cool. I can't believe a show that is super woke said this line. I think this character is possibly the only likable character on the show, and also he had a good philosophy point here.
This is why the world keeps getting worse. People keep doing shit that we deem unforgivable, and in return, they decide there's no reason to change. So now you got a whole bunch of people running around who don't give a fuck about redemption. That's scary.
But that's about it. Out of 10 hours of content, those were the only good moments. I mean, this show is so bad that they chose a main character, Zendaya, that can be removed from the show without significantly changing the plot. She's probably only in it because she's the most famous. There is so much bad writing in this show, the worst of it being the episode that Nicole recommended. And it's not because there weren't enough female writers. The actual answer for accurate and appealing characters is not to have more male or female writers, it's to listen and pay attention to real people, think about things from their perspective, and write good stories based on that. The point being, and how we actually solve problems here, is to use better data and use more accurate evidence. Nicole's evidence about men caring that women like dad bods is weak. She also doesn't provide strong evidence that women have a preference for feminine men over masculine men, and ignores that a likely reason that those toxic male writers put those kinds of men in movies is because a ton of women are saying that's what they want, and that's what sells. Remember when writers used to give the audience what they want? And she doesn't provide strong evidence that women are more capable than men at writing successful and accurate-to-life movies. At best, her argument would just mean that the male characters or their female counterparts written by women would be written improperly because men can't empathize with women properly, and women can't empathize with men properly, which in my opinion is really just more of a self-report. Though in her defense, her channel is way more fair than most of the modern feminist channels that I've watched. She even admits to generalizing.
Obviously, this is not about every single man or every single woman. It's called generalization. We all do it, okay?
Thank God. I am so glad that one of them said that everyone generalizes. Finally. Outside of that, I think we are all susceptible to having wrong ideas, using poor evidence, and not thinking out things properly. The problem with maintaining weak ideas or accepting bad evidence is that it will cause you to work to solve the wrong problem. Or it can do things like cause undue hatred of a particular group because you blame behavior of a small portion of that group on the entire group. I've certainly seen many anti-feminists and feminists using the same kind of rhetoric to do that, and I don't think people such as Nicole are intentionally doing it. Certainly there are people who do, but she isn't one of them. But to avoid falling into that trap, you have to constantly criticize your own ideas. Every time I write a video, I am constantly asking, how would my opponent defeat my idea? In fact, while I was writing the script, I had a real-life woman argue against me and defend Nicole's points so that I would say fewer stupid things in this video. Not only does that make your idea stronger, but it actually teaches you how to see things from other people's point of view, which will make you a better person, and give you a more accurate and nuanced opinion. The best part is that it doesn't really take a massive amount of intelligence to do this. You just have to listen to other people's perspectives and factor that in when you're forming your ideas on a particular situation. Anyway, thanks for watching, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.